Hola. Hola. So anyhow, I was inspired to share with you today. I was inspired because two individuals sent me messages in my inbox on Facebook today. Oh, I think one was yesterday. Maybe one was today, one was yesterday. No matter. The point is, two individuals sent me this article from the Business Insider regarding African Americans and the fact that we do not typically participate or plan our estate. We don't do estate planning. I think the title of the article said lessons I learned about financing with respect to estate planning or something along those lines. But essentially, the substance of the article is a young lady was telling the story of how her mother did not have a will and she ended up in probate and the financial implications of not having a will. I'm going to take the conversation a bit further because I say no will. I mean, you should have a will, but I'm saying a will should not be your primary estate planning tool. You've heard me talk about this before. Have you not? Have you not? Oh, this is something new too I'm going to try out because I'm still sitting in my office and I should be leaving, but I have not. So if you want to call me, I'm going to give one person an opportunity to call. If you choose, you can call me at 708-991-7268. It's 708-991-7268. Hello. Hello, Miss Bates. Hello, Miss Hayes. Hello, Sir Preston. All you good people. So let's talk about it real quick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Why not a will, or how should we utilize a will? First and foremost, I want you to know that a will is antiquated. I mean, a will is old school. I'm saying a will is like using a will for estate planning is the equivalent of using a payphone for your form of communication. It's like, hey, I need to make a call. Imagine if a client came into my office and they were like, hey, Attorney Fenton, I forgot something. I need to call my wife. Or if it were a woman, she'd be like, hey, Attorney Fenton, I need to call my husband. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. What I need you to do is go ahead and exit through the same door that you entered, walk 2 blocks south, make a right, head west on that street 2 blocks down, and then on the right hand side you're going to see something. It's called a payphone. So imagine someone comes to my office, they need to make a call, they need to phone their spouse, and I tell them walk 3 or 4 blocks from my office and there's a payphone on the corner. Essentially, that's what you're saying when you're talking about using a will. Essentially, what you're talking about is for your mode of communication, you are going to rely upon a payphone. Nothing wrong with a payphone. I'm telling you, I used to use payphones when I was in college, freshman or sophomore year, before I could afford a cell phone. So a will is antiquated. A will lacks flexibility, just like a payphone. On a payphone, you don't have caller ID. There is no call waiting. You can't tell the payphone, hey, walk with me. I don't want to sit here on the corner and have this conversation. Payphone, I need you to roll with me as I scurry on down the street. Doesn't do that. Also, a payphone is costly. Like every 15 seconds, it's like, please deposit another nickel. I'm not that old. Let's move it up. Please deposit another dime. I think Johnny might be that old. I'm not that old. But I do remember, please deposit another quarter. Yeah. Payphones can be expensive and they're unnecessary. Why are payphones, i.e., why is a will unnecessary and expensive, and why am I comparing a will to a payphone? Because a will too is an expensive estate planning tool. There's a reason why attorneys try to sell you wills for $350. You can go online right now, you can Google, I need a will, or you can call an attorney, hey attorney, I need a will. And they'll tell you, hey, yeah, no problem, $300, $400, $500. It doesn't sound very expensive today, but I promise you tomorrow when it's time to use that will, is going to get very expensive. You know why? You know why a will is expensive? You know why it's antiquated? You know why it's like using a payphone? Because a will, I saw your phone call today. Leave me be. Octavia. I got it. Same Octavia? No. So anyhow, a will requires probate. So if you write down, hey, when I'm gone, when I transition, when I go above those, when I go beyond the comfy clouds, if you write that in a will, it's not enforceable. A will has no true value until it's taken to court, until it's recorded by the clerk of the court in the county in which you resided upon your demise. Until a judge says that your will is valid, a will has no real basis of enforcement. So you can make all of the demands, desires, wishes, articulate all of your desires rather that you want in a will, but it cannot be enforced until it's taken to the courts. So the reason why a will is expensive is because it requires probate. Because it requires enforcement by the courts and via or pursuant to an order of the court. Here's also why wills become an expensive proposition, because wills can be contested. Oftentimes, a will can be contested. Here's another reason why wills are antiquated like a payphone. Why? Because when you're on a payphone, standing on the corner for an hour talking to your husband or to your spouse because Attorney Fenton wouldn't let you use his phone in his office, people can see you and people can hear you. I've never been inside. What would it be called? What would it be called? It'd be called a sound protected payphone. Imagine if they created a sound booth, like you're in the payphone, but no one can hear you in the box. Not true. Same thing with a will. A will is a public record. So when you take a will to court, it's public record. Anyone can go to the clerk of the county in which the will was recorded, right? And they can access your will. We can pull your records. Like Whitney Houston had a will, although she had a trust, but her will was public record. So people were like, hey, this is what Whitney said, and she said this about this, and this is who's in charge of her estate. So you don't want your business out in the streets like that. Well, some people do. Most people do not. So a will also is a public record. A will is antiquated. It lacks privacy, and it also lacks flexibility. What do I mean by a will lacks flexibility? You can't say in a will, oh, Attorney Fenton, write this will up, and when I go, I want you to leave the house that I owned prior to marrying or meeting the love of my life, my husband. I want to leave my husband this home, but here's the deal. I don't want my husband to be able to keep the home forever. If my husband ever remarries, then I want the home then to go to my children. Or I want my husband to be able to live in the home so as long as he chooses, but upon his demise, I want the home You can't do that in a will. You don't have all those choices in a will. Either you're going to give the property to your husband, your spouse, to your wife, or not. Either you're going to give the property to your 2 children or not, but you can't place restrictions and conditions on the gifts that you provide via a will. It lacks flexibility, just like a payphone. You don't get all those choices under a will, people. That's why folk talk about trust, because a trust is private. It's no requirement that you record a trust anywhere. It doesn't have to be recorded in the county in which you resided upon your passing. It doesn't. It's a private document, like a contract. Most contracts, unless it's with the government, it's private. You can place restrictions and conditions in the gifts that you provide via a trust. Oh, let me tell you something else about a will, because this came up. I think I made mention of it on a Facebook post. Oh, I did. Anyhow. I talked about how a client, no, it wasn't a post, it's a writing, it's an article that I'm writing. I talked about how a client of mine, she amassed quite the bit of a mini fortune. She saved $1 million or more, and she owned real estate. She was married, and she became estranged from her husband in her latter years. Both her and her husband lived to be early 80s, late 70s, no, early mid 80s. So anyhow, she saved quite a bit of money, more than $1 million. This happened a couple of years ago. Her and her husband were estranged, did not divorce, they were estranged. She wanted to disinherit her husband. This is something that you need to know about a will. I know it doesn't apply to you, but you need to know this about a will. You can't disinherit your spouse in a will. So as an example, in her case, she didn't want to leave her husband anything. In fact, her husband had his own money too. He was not poor by any means, but she didn't want to leave him any of her $1 million in assets. She had more than $1 million liquid, and she had owned real estate. So her net worth was about 1.3 million, 1.4 million. This is what I need you to know about a will, as in this case. She passed, for whatever reason, let's just pretend for this conversation, that she had a will, but no trust. Let's pretend. I want you to know that if you are attempting to disinherit your spouse in Illinois, as is in most other jurisdictions, I can only speak for Illinois, because if she divorced him, he probably would have gotten half Monica. So she was waiting him out, maybe. Let's just take that as a theory. Sometimes if you're old enough, she's like, well, if I divorce him, he'll be coming after my assets, because it could be perceived as marital property. It could be a long, drawn out affair. So sometimes the wise thing is just to wait him out if you're in your 80s. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. So anyhow, this is what I want you to know. If you choose not to leave certain assets to your spouse, and you utilize a will as your primary estate planning tool, I want you to know that your spouse can essentially go into court and say, hey, throw that will out of court. Well, they can't throw the entire will out of court, but you cannot effectively disinherit your spouse by utilizing a will, because your spouse has a right to ask or demand what is called an elective share. Your spouse will receive minimum 1/3 of your assets that you are attempting to transfer through probate. So I want you to know, if you're trying to get around your spouse, a will ain't the way to go. All right. So I just want to drop that little note on you. A will is not good enough, but I want you to at least have a will. But a will is not good enough. And if you're utilizing a will for your estate planning, for the planning of your children and for your spouse, I think you may want to reconsider and start looking at some more advanced technology or tools, i.e. a land trust or a living trust, or corporations if you own real estate, whether it's an LLC, what have you. No one took me up on the call. I'll give you 1 second. I'm going to give someone 10 seconds. 708-991-7268. If anybody wants to call and ask a question, I'll give you 10 seconds. 9 seconds. 708-991-7268. Okay, that's it. Any more questions? Yes, a trust is necessary to keep it out of probate. Bottom line to all of this conversation is a will's not enough, people. It's not, especially if you have significant assets, okay? It can also be expensive because you can have will contests. Oh, here's another reason why not a will. Because your creditors can show up. When you have a will, you're attempting to transfer assets or receive assets via will from your parents, grandparents. The will must be recorded. You must open an estate. And then in Illinois, as an example, there's a 6-month waiting period. You must provide notice to creditors. If you have known creditors, you must provide them direct notice. If you don't know of the creditors, then you must provide them notice via publication, and then they can come in for 6 months and make a claim against the estate. So what you thought you were going to pass down to your children, grandchildren, and so forth, you may not be, because creditors will show up in that 6-month period. That was the whole point of the article. Creditors will show up, and you'll burn up attorney's fees. If you have an estranged brother, sister, or whatever the case may be, they may also show up and contest the will. Mama wasn't in her right mind when she left half of her assets to my sister. She wanted me to have those. You follow what I'm trying to say? Don't do it, people. All right, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask those questions. Did someone call me? Someone took me up on this? I'll give it 1 second. My paralegal's on the phone. I thought she was gone. 708-991-7268. Any more questions? Going once, going twice. You can always reach me through my website, attorneyernestfenton.com. Until next time, peace out. I say to thee, peace.